Good afternoon, everyone. This is Colton from Jennifer Schaus and Associates, and we're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today. We're kicking off 2022 with a new complimentary webinar series, and that is for our GIFT program, that is Government Industry Parties. And this webinar series is designed for companies who are trying to reach government contractors. Content can be anything related to building federal sales teams, which is what we are covering today, and any other topic that are suitable for government contractors. This program is going to be a three-part series for companies to reach federal contractors by doing either 1, 2, or 3 webinars, typically running about 30 minutes each. We'll promote it through our newsletter, which reaches over 23,000 subscribers. We'll be hosting on our GoToWebinar platform, and we will record the webinar and upload it to our YouTube channel, and the PowerPoint will go to slideshare.net. If you want information on pricing, please email hello@jenniferschaus.com. And here's a couple statistics for once our webinar has been put out and is recorded. Our YouTube channel is now at about 38,000 subscribers, and we are reaching up to 3.7 million impressions. As you can see, our top 4 videos have thousands of downloads and some decent numbers there on the click-through rate. And again, if you want pricing and information on this program, send us an email, and we're happy to provide our media kit. We will be answering questions today during the webinar, so we ask that if you have a question, please type it in the chat box. Without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Judy Bratt from Summit Insight.
Thank you, Colton. It's just a joy to be here, and welcome to Federal Sales Team Struggling, Can't Grow Sales. It is such an important thing to be able to do. And because if we don't, ultimately, if we don't actually make the offer, then we can't be successful. We can't reach our federal buyers. And so with that, let's dig in. I had part of this, the topic comes from the fact that in talking to dozens or hundreds of federal buyers throughout the federal buyers and contractors throughout the year, hundreds of conversations of all the reasons why people say that they are struggling in the federal market. If we boiled down the analysis from talking to lots and lots of people, 35% of the reasons why people are struggling in the federal market, it boils down to there's not a fit between what they do in the federal market and what a federal buyer needs, or they're not ready. But get this, 65% of the reasons why people are struggling, don't make calls, feel real discomfort over the things they have to do in the market, all relate to struggling with sales. So if there were some things that you could do that could make it easier to connect with your federal buyer, would you do those things? Just drop in the chat, yes or no. Would you do those things? And seeing yes, and yes, and yes. So you're in the right place. So how do you know when this is something that needs your attention? Here's some signs. All right. So you know the feeling when your federal sales team just isn't delivering. You're paying 1 or more people for results and you're still waiting for the wins. Your people are good. They're hungry for wins too. They're working hard, but the dollars, the revenue isn't coming in. They're asking for more time. They're asking for resources. You as the business owner going, well, when do I stop shelling out? How do I know? Because you've got faith in them, but you're not sure what else it's going to take to win. Another sign that this needs attention, your proposal team feels burned out. And that's a real risk because good proposal teams, good proposal writers are hard to find. If they're pumping out novels for strangers and getting demoralized because they're not getting the results, you're at risk of losing good people. You know the feeling when your competitors keep winning the work you deserve, winning work on contract vehicles you've tried hard to win. It doesn't have to be that way. 3 things change this game for good, and here they are: focus, connection, and consistency. We're going to talk about how those apply in really specific circumstances and what you can do to really get your sales team revved up and out of the doldrums, out of the flat part of the sales curve. All right, let's do it and start changing the game for good. get ready to take action, because as we get to the end of the content of this webinar, I'm going to ask you, what's your aha? What's your takeaway? What are you going to commit to do, and by when? If you're here and ready and committed to take action, to take at least one thing away from this experience, from our time together, drop yes in the chat. All right, let's see it in the chat box or in the Q&A. All right, let's drop it in. Say yes if you're ready to take action, and that's why you're here. Okay. Excellent. That's what I want to see. Fabulous. Thank you. All right. So use lots of questions, put lots of questions in the chat as we go along. I'm going to be asking you questions as we go. We're going to be sharing experiences, so get ready for that. In each of these 3 webinars, there is no sleeping by the PowerPoint. You're here to learn, to bring up questions, to talk to each other, and to find good takeaways in action that can help you win more in the federal market. That's what we're here for. And so with that, you're going to learn who should really be doing sales, what you need to give your team, where you need to be calling, when to call, why they'll return your calls, how you know it's working, and we'll finish up with some resources and next steps. The most costly misunderstanding people have about federal sales is this: the idea that we're surrounded by opportunities, and yet there's no such thing as selling to the federal government. No such thing as selling to the government. I'm going to say that again. There's no such thing as selling to the government. When your company is successful and wins a contract, you, as the business owner, are going to have your signature, physical or electronic, on an actual document that binds your company and the government of the United States to a commitment and a legal agreement to deliver products or services. But that's signed by another human being who has everything on the line when they choose you. So while there's no such thing as selling to the government, there's only doing business with people. Your federal buyer is very, very human. This is Josephine Cobb. She was in the federal contracting arena on the buyer side of the desk for 53 years, starting at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska, and then for over 50 years at Travis Air Force Base. Can you imagine 50 years? But your buyer's a human being, and they have hopes and fears and everything on the line when they choose you. I do a lot of programs in working with small teams and larger teams of companies in the federal arena. I work with them in a really intense experience that's all about what I call federal human connection. And as part of that, I ask folks regularly, just as we're going to be doing here, what's your aha? What's the big thing you learned? And time after time, here's the one thing that comes up. They'll say, I never realized our federal buyers are human. They're just people. And so I'm borrowing a page right from the core of my work. And I want you to think about your federal buyer and what do you know about them as a human being? 80% of government contractors are in the federal market asking the wrong question. Have you ever looked at what's in front of you, looked at your plan, looked at competitive intelligence in the marketplace and asked this question: what can I bid? If you did, I want to tell you right now that everything changes when you stop asking, what can I bid? And start looking for the answer you really need to be successful. Here it is. Who's my buyer? Who's my buyer, and how can I get to know them sooner? Because if you see that perfect opportunity on SAM.gov and you don't know the buyer and you don't know the budget and you don't know the incumbent and you don't know the history, your odds of winning are in the single digits. The most valuable thing you can often do is peel out the contact information, because almost everybody here is not the prime contractor selling aircraft carriers. It's not like this is the only time that the federal government is going to be buying that thing that you do for the next 50 years. That person, those points of contact, are almost certainly going to be buying something like what you do again. And so that's the first of a clue to start to get to know these folks and get to know them before opportunities get published. Focus is the foundation for federal sales success. Focus on several different levels. The first area where focus changes your success trajectory is this: focus on your target agencies. One of my favorite people in the world, Neil Wilson, who's owner of Gear Engineering, does aquifer engineering in Florida. And Neil and I met back in 2009 when he was a Navy veteran, really, really good at environmental science and engineering. And he was so frustrated. He was really telling me that he had gone to all kinds of small business events and people who were saying, oh, we love service disabled veterans. We have to award 3% of our contracts to service disabled veterans. He said, I got nothing. I spent $65,000. That was my budget for the whole year. I got a goose egg. I said, well, what have you been doing, Neil? And he looked, he showed me this big stack of business cards. He was based in Florida. He'd been to Alabama, Louisiana, and Georgia, and all over the Panhandle. And I said, wow, that's a lot of work, Neil. You're a mile wide, but an inch deep. And most of these people don't even care you're alive. You talk to them once, maybe call them, maybe twice. Maybe you reached them, maybe you didn't. So here's what let's do. Sort them out. Look at the agencies and facilities that are in your backyard. Turns out there was Veterans Administration in Bay Pines, there's Kennedy Space Flight Center, Jacksonville Naval Air Station. Those were close by. Those are ones you could get to regularly. So take the rest of the cards and kind of put them in a little pile and talk to them. Do your business cards ever talk to you? The ones that mumble in your drawer and keep you up at night? It's a strange phenomenon. It happens to me too. It's okay. So take the other other stack of cards, bid them a fond farewell, say that you'll be back, and really dig in and get to know the people who are close by. And he did that. And he called me up and he said, well, we bid, but we lost. I said, well, Neil, did you get a debrief? He said, a what? He said, a debriefing. You submitted the proposal as a prime contractor, so you have standing. You can ask them for feedback. He said, oh, okay. And later he called me up and he said, well, hey, they said they really liked the bid. It was our first bid there. They said there were some things that they really would have loved to award the work to us, but there were some things we needed to fix. So we learned, and he bid again, and he won that one. And that was his first federal contract. And he's gone on to grow and thrive and become an esteemed member of the Society of American Military Engineers and a leader helping other people understand the magic of focus. And so that's the power. It makes all the difference when you're concentrated tightly. The second thing to focus on are what I call your best values, your best values. And that's even more powerful than your set-asides. For example, your best values are those things that are quantifiable, ideally, and they're unique to you. Probably only 3 or 4 things. They're the reasons why people choose you. What it is that you do in a way that is unique, objectively definable, and ideally quantifiable. And the reason why that's important and powerful is by constantly talking about those 3 or 4 reasons why you represent the low risk choice, why you represent a successful outcome to your federal buyer. Continue to choose and drip, talking about those things, your best values, in your emails, in your conversations, on your LinkedIn content, talking about those themes time and again. Starts to shift how your buyer is thinking, and they realize that that's what the low risk choice looks like and feels like and sounds like. It gives your federal buyer the opportunity to drop reference to those things. Maybe it's, if you're in construction or roofing, your EMR rating. Maybe if you're help desk, your response time. Maybe if you're personnel, your average length of time that somebody stays in the job after you get hired. Those quantifiable things. in your federal buyer ordinance to drop that into the desirable characteristics of the contractor when they're defining what they want. And so they're not saying they want your company specifically, but they're making it easy to award the work to you when they get to that short list. Okay, everybody follow? Your best values are super powerful. And where you find those is take a look at your past performance. What are the common characteristics that show up time and again in your most successful contracts? So best values, focus on your best values in all your communications, all your calls, and look at those places where those best values are going to be things that make your buyers happy and connect with you. Finally, you want to focus on the goals of your federal buyers. You've got people in many different roles, but how are you talking to each individual person about not just big goals, but milestones, about tiny little micro engagements or steps that every single time they talk to you, they realize they're getting closer to something that's important to them. Sometimes you're talking with them about something they've mentioned that's personal. Sometimes their goals as a human being might be to be there for their family. Maybe they've mentioned that you're just saying, how are you? How are you doing before we dive into the call? And say, I'm really exhausted. I was up all night with my aunt who's gone into the hospital for chemo, and it's just breaking my heart. Pay attention to things like that, because it may very well be that you can just remember to ask about their person. You can remember to ask them about how are you doing. It may be that you've got some notes or an article or something like that can help them about something that's important to them, to be a good human being, as well as the goals they have professionally and in the mission in the organization. Now that may sound really ooey gooey, but people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. It's one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Maya Angelou. So before we talk about sales, let's get this straight, all right? There's a lot of confusion about several different roles. So here's the deal. Business development in the federal market, we get afraid of the word sales as if it's something yucky and slimy. And people will say business development, and they really mean someone has to sell, but maybe it's not me. Business development is creating long-term value. It may be creating an environment where the company can thrive. It may be creating networks of connections, getting partnerships aligned. All of those things are part of business development. Business development is not the same as marketing. Marketing is about helping them find you. Okay, helping them find you. And your federal buyer, did you know, checks you out an average of 12 times online before they even talk to you. And so there's a whole other school of thought and lots more to say that we're not covering in this webinar about all the different ways that between your website, your SAM profile, your dynamic small business search profile, profiles on agencies, different portals, all of those things can combine, and your LinkedIn profile, how all of those things can combine to make buyers more aware of you. But that doesn't do the essential part of selling. Sales is helping them choose you. And that's the part that has to happen in order for somebody to award work to you and to pay you money. And that's an important part of what all of us usually need to have happen in the federal market. So who is it that really does sales? I would say, remind you of the adage, everybody does sales. You have salespeople, people who you are giving the responsibility as a business owner to call on people, build relationships, get to know them. But the C-suite, the CEO, CFO, COO, CMO, the owners and executives in the company have a role in sales. A lot of the time, the federal buyer wants to see the top people in the company showing up at events, because when that happens, or on calls, that also gives them the message that there's somebody besides somebody besides the business owner that's home doing the work. Sometimes they want to know that you're the person who's going to have the signature on the document, so they want to see you and talk to you. Okay. Subject matter experts. They are definitely part of the sales effort. The conversations that your federal buyers in their end user layer have with your subject matter experts start to make them feel comfortable about you as the low risk choice. And so subject matter experts, and believe me, I have been there, can often be really squeamish about, I don't want to be selling. We're all selling. I want you to think about sales. Remember, we talked about sales as helping them choose you. People do business with people they like, and people do business with people they trust. And that trust is built through small interactions. Every single person in your company who touches or influences the client experience, the experience someone has in working with you, your company, influences how they like you, how they know you, how they trust you. So your proposal team is presenting a face of your company to those who are evaluating that proposal. And they're also talking with your salespeople who are in the account. Everyone who delivers product or service to your federal buyer, they're a fundamental part of how someone experiences your company. That has everything to do with, do they like you enough to keep you, to have you back? Your help desk response, whether that is you're doing IT help desk and that's a person who's service delivery, or somebody who's on call, who's taking the relay from Google Voice on that 24/7 hotline. Is that person cheerful and well-informed, articulate, can get help from a higher level, is authorized to solve problems in the moment? That has everything to do with creating the customer experience. That's part of sales. Your administration and your contract administration, the people who are managing the details of that contract, critical part of whether somebody thinks you've got your act together. Your human resource team, are you doing everything you can to recruit the right people into the job, make sure they're compensated well, their expectations are communicated with, they're getting good reviews, good performance feedback? You see how all this comes together? Because this may be your aha moment. How you do anything is how you do everything. I want to say it again. How you do anything is how you do everything. So everyone has that responsibility to be contributing to that customer experience. Everyone who's part of the customer experience does sales. What do you need to give your federal team in order for them to be successful? If your sales team is struggling, take a look and consider, am I giving them all the things that they need? Successful sales teams in the federal arena say that here are some of the things that matter. Are you giving them good competitive intelligence tools, not just a foundation for what to look for, but ongoing, continual building of your team's skills in how to find and read and interpret and act on federal competitive intelligence? That should be part of every federal sales team's toolkit. Federal sales training, not just generic sales training, but training that helps people understand on your team, everyone that was just on the previous slide, what is it that we need to be doing to be building that customer relationship at every touch? How are we making an extraordinary experience every single time our federal buyer is in contact with us? A structured federal sales plan. Truly successful federal sales teams not only have those federal target agencies, but they have a structured plan that's built around the players at all those layers in each place where you want to build relationships. And you have a systematic, methodical way to knit together the relationships with people you know and into relationships with people that the data shows you don't know but need to know. People whose identity and role and activity and responsibility suggests that you need to know them as well. They need to be on your side if you're going to be successful. Professional development and coaching. That's broader than just federal sales or competitive intelligence. And it's especially important if you've got millennials in your company, because the ability to retain key people can be positively affected by how that they see you're willing to invest in them and their careers and their futures. And if you're thinking, why should I bother? These people are just going to leave. The investment you make in people to show them you care about them can mean they stay longer. It also means that when they go out into the world, your reputation as a great employer and a great person to work for also grows. And It can mean that they are stronger in every way. It also means that you're building your bench within your company. There's nothing better when you're looking for who do I have that could be doing sales, uh, to be able to look around you and say, who is it in my team who's saying, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play. And be able to give them the chance to show off their skills, show you their stuff, and help your company be successful. You're in the same way as when you're on a flight and the flight attendant says, be careful and look around you if we have to exit the aircraft because the exit that you need may be behind you. The salesperson, your next team member coming up, could be right next to you. So don't overlook them. Marketing support. Salespeople need to sell, but they do need to have support from great collateral, great capability statement, great LinkedIn content presence. All kinds of marketing support helps your sales folks be more productive. So you do need to give them some marketing support. So you're doing lead generation that they can pick up and take the handoff from people who've nibbled on your content, who've showed up. You can see your website is set up so you can see engagement and get in touch with people who have downloaded a thing, who've visited, who've looked at your content. And business development support. All of those things help. What else do you need to give your federal sales team? Clearly communicated expectations. What are the goals that you want to achieve? One of the things I always ask my clients is, if you were successful beyond your wildest dreams in the federal market, what would be true for you? How much new revenue would be coming through the door 12 or 18 months from now? And then how does that break into smaller contracts, smaller bits? And I love the fact that when I have these conversations with business owners in the federal arena, people's wildest dreams are so grounded. Nobody says, oh, I'd love to win like $200 million worth of stuff. Nobody ever says that to me. Someone says, all right, well, I'd like to win 3 5-year contracts that are $1.5 million base and 1 million options for 4 years. It's very, very specific, which is great. So to be able to communicate that and say, well, what does the path look like to get there? Bring your sales team into that and everybody be pulling toward the same stuff. Regular feedback on progress. It's a long haul between October 1st and September 30th. And so much of what objectively is happening is work, 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 spend, 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 nothing, 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 boom. And so to be able to have milestones so that you can give feedback and encouragement and let people know that, yeah, you are making progress, you are doing the right stuff, really helpful. I say collaborative culture because you've heard people say government contracting is a relationship game. It is also a team sport. If you're going to be successful, you need to have more than one person exchanging information on and building relationships in the account and collaborating, cooperating, helping each other with research and ideas for connecting with your federal humans. When that happens, that changes the whole game inside your company. Support each other. Federal is a very tough place to be. If you give the whole of winning federal business, doing all of sales and business development and marketing over to one person and say, okay, good luck. It's a lonely, scary place to be. And it's almost never where success comes from. Encouragement and recognition, to be able to notice and recognize the milestones and even the small steps along the way that experience has shown you are the things that lead to your wins. And celebration, to support resilience. Research shows that celebrating those small things gives us the stamina to go the journey, go the distance. GovCon's a team sport. Connection, where do you need to be calling? So we talked about focus, now we're talking about connection. You need to be calling. If somebody asked you, who's my federal buyer? I want you to drop in the chat for a moment. All right, who do you think your federal buyer is structurally? What job title do they have? Who's your federal buyer? I want you to drop in the chat. Things that people typically say, some people will say contracting officer. Some people will say small business specialist. Some people will say contracting officer's representative. Other folks say, oh, the program manager, that's my person. Every so often I'll get someone who will say, oh, the CIO, that's the person I need to call on. And the answer is not any one of them, but often all of them. in my team, we talk about the players at all 5 layers. I'm going to just quickly run over them, and you're going to get to know them and what they need and want and respond to. And it's quite different. Each one of these players at every layer has a different set of goals, different sets of milestones on the way, and different sets of small things that they're going to be excited about and respond to. And so differentiating between what contracting needs, what the end user layer needs, what the small business specialist needs. And hint, the small business specialist in 99.99% of the instances you're selling in the federal arena, small business specialist is not your buyer. I'm going to say it again, the small business specialist is not your buyer. They can navigate, they can be helpful, they can also make it a little harder for you to get through if you're not prepared. They can be tremendously valuable as an ally the more work you've done. The stakeholder and industry, current prime, incumbent prime, large and small, and competitors who are nipping at their heels. And so you need to have connection, certainly awareness, and very often relationships, personal relationships at all 5 of these layers if you want to be successful. And you can find out more about the players at all 5 layers in our proprietary players and layers methodology on my website, and we'll give you the link to that at the end. The thing I want you to think about is think about that person, like our friend Josephine Cobb. What goals are going to be important to that person? That's the end point. The relationship needs to be taking them toward. If you know that every single time you talk to them, you're going to be bringing them ideas, content, support that you know is taking them toward a place that's important to them, they're much more likely to return your call. If you're going, this is a whole lot of work, I don't have time for this, I just want to send some emails and have them hit the button. You know, if you don't have time to learn about your federal buyer, they sure as heck don't have time to learn about you. Consistency is the third piece. We talked about focus and connection. Consistency is the third piece because reliability is one of the 7 elements of trust. And when someone says to you, I don't trust you, that's somewhere between disappointing and absolutely terrifying, depending on how important that relationship is to you and whether it's a new relationship or whether it's one you're deeply into and really, really matters to you. And so I will tell you that the work that Dr. Brené Brown has done unpacks and articulates the 7 elements of trust. I'm just going to talk about reliability here as being reflected in consistency of your efforts. Mistakes that sales teams make are easily addressed and fixed by looking at consistency and improving your reliability. Personnel. Keep your team members that are your designated representative and point of contact with your federal buyers. Keep that person in the role. You want to keep them in there for a year, 18 months, 2 years at the very least, because having the same person keep showing up and building relationships and say, you matter to me, says you matter to me, and I'm going to get to know you. One of the mistakes people make is swapping people out after 3 or 4 months and going, yeah, you're not doing anything. We're going to put somebody else in that job. So consistency in the personnel who are constantly building relationships in the account contributes to raising their perception of you as reliable. Consistency in the number and type and quality of calls that you're making and what you're covering in those calls. Remember we talked about best values? To be able to cover consistently, touch on those 2 or 3 points regularly so people get to understand this is what you're about. You're the people who are always talking about safety ratings. If you're, let's say, a construction company, for example, or with your, let's say you run IT help desk, you're the one who's constantly talking about the 99.95% response rate within 2 minutes or something like that. And so making calls on your federal buyers regularly. One of the things that people struggle with is, well, how often can I talk to these people? How often can I call them without them thinking I'm a pest? Breathe. Research shows it takes between 15 and 30 touches to get from contact to contract. 15 to 30 touches. Too many salespeople give up after about 3 or 4 messages and go, they're not interested. So regularly, consistently calling, combination of calls, voicemails, emails, stick with it. And that's only possible when you've focused. And finally, consistency in what I call your engagement curve. Do you have a destination that you're looking to take your relationship to with each of your contacts, your players at all the layers? And have you thought through what represents deeper and deeper journey into relationship, as opposed to, hi, do you need me? Hello, do you need me? Hello, it's Wednesday. Do you need our stuff yet? Hi, it's March. Do you need our stuff yet? Think about how you can continually ramp up the value you're adding, even things that don't cost you money, you're investing time, but you're more deeply taking people into understanding how you can help them. You're showing them in small ways what you can do to make their lives better and easier and make them more successful. Measure what you do, track them, your people's results, give them the support they need to get you where you're going to want to go, and celebrate the progress. I remember having this conversation with Barbara. Barbara called me up. She was in an incredible panic. She said, I can't believe it. I did the thing you told me to do, and I got this email from my federal buyer, and just life is over. I can't ever go back into that agency. Barbara, what happened? She said, well, look, I was responding. I was doing a follow-up to this sources saw, and I got this message from the contracting officer saying, we are not responding to industry at this time. I made the most awful mistake. I said, Barbara, breathe. First, you got something that so many people would just love to have. Do you know what it is? You got a response from a contracting officer. How great is that? Second, they're dancing with you. They said, we're not responding at this time. Well, great. You can say, I just want to follow proper protocol. What's yours? When's a good time to get back in touch? Is phone or email a good way to reach you? Should it be before or after Memorial Day? That's engagement. It's too easy to misread what I call signs of micro engagement, tiny touches that show you that you are engaged, you're building that relationship, you're going back and forth, you are in connection. All of that matters. So when do you call? Now. Learn the right message for the right person at the right time of the acquisition cycle, the right time in the federal fiscal year, the right player at the right layer, and talking about the right thing. There's always someone to talk to, always. And so don't ever let someone on your sales team say, oh, there's nobody to talk to. They're not talking to us right now. It may be that the person you're talking to is not able to talk to you right now about an acquisition that's deeply in the acquisition stage or in source selection. It may be that that person could talk to you if you were talking to them 4 months earlier or about something else. But there are always people to call. Why will they return your calls? Eventually. And I want you to really think carefully about this. What's the one thing you can know for sure? Drop it in the chat. That you can know for certain when somebody doesn't return your calls. And this happens to me all the time. 100% of the time, there's one thing you can be absolutely certain of. What do you think it is? Drop it in the chat. People say they don't want what we do. And they say, they're really too busy for us. Or they bought from our competitor, or our price is too high. Now, that might be true some of the time, but here it is. The one thing that's true every single time that they didn't return your call, that you can know absolutely for sure, that they didn't return your call. That's it. If you have not actually spoken with them or corresponded, you can't know. Now imagine our brains are making up all this crap. Our brains are wired to give us a dopamine hit when we get an answer. And so if our brains are making up all this junk and getting in our way, little wonder we get discouraged and give up. And so remember to think with generosity. Assume the best about everyone if you haven't got actual facts or a response, and verify when you actually do talk to them what's going on with them. Reasons why they will eventually return your call include an awesome voicemail. I want to flip this over because I've talked to seasoned contracting officers and I've asked them to say, why don't you return calls? And Dottie Romo had told me they leave awful voicemails. I went, Dottie, who could leave a mean voicemail for you? She said, oh, it's like this. Hi, it's Sarah. It's Friday at 3 o'clock and I need you to get back to me by 5 o'clock with information about that RFP because I have to do a proposal this weekend. Click. Really? And urgency on your part is worth what on my part? Really hard. No, they like you. We go back to all those things. Did you remember to ask them how they're doing? Did you remember to ask them what happened in that meeting that they had with the cabinet secretary? Did you remember to ask them just did their husband feel better after getting the booster shot? Whatever it was, you're caring about them. Eventually they return your calls because they do have a specific need. Remember that every time they say no and no and no, I want you to think of that as not now, because eventually you keep showing up and the time will be now. Show them how you lower the risk. No federal buyer likes risk. Think about risk and how working with you, what you do, how you do it, lowers their risk. Come back to best values. What is it that makes it easier to do business with you, and how you stand out from other people who do things similar to what you do? Timing. Sometimes you've got to be making calls for all 10 months before in month 11, yeah, we're ready now. The business in federal fourth quarter all too often goes to the people who are showing up in first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter. Be present with meaning, and you're going to be top of mind. That helps you be top of mind when they do need you. Hint, returning your calls is almost never about your set-asides. And we're going to be talking about that in another one of our webinars. How often do you call? There's no one perfect answer. Everybody's human. Everybody needs something different. Some people love voicemail, but don't want to talk to you in person. Some people love email because they can read it on their phone at night or on the bus. Some people really only want to meet you in person, and so it's really hard right now, and so they'll have to do a Zoom. Research shows it's taking 15 to 30 touches from contact to contract. So be prepared to go the distance. Keep track of that. It's not too much to try reaching someone 3 or even 4 times in a week. That is not too much. I'm going to say it again. It's not too much to maybe make 3 or 4 reaches within a week. We've talked about what it means when they don't return your call. It just means they didn't return your call. Try early in the morning. Lots of govies get in at 6:30 in the morning, or working from home still, very, very early birds, or late in the afternoon. So try at different times of day, different days of the week. Again, it's okay to try 3 or 4 times in a week, and there are ways to leave a message that includes saying when you're going to call again, and call then. Be relentlessly consistent. It makes all the difference. How do you know it's working? The concept of continuous micro engagement is something I want to put in front of you. The idea that you're wooing them. You're wooing them. And so small signs of life that either of you can initiate that move you both towards your goals. That's it. Look for the tiny signs of life. So we've covered a lot. If your sales team is stuck, 3 things change the whole game: focus, connection, and consistency. We covered who should really be doing sales, what you need to give your team, where you need to be calling, when to call, why they'll return your calls, and how to know it's working. And now we're going to dive into some resources and some next steps. But my charge to you is to change the game for good and get involved in and establish 3 kinds of focus on your target agencies, your best values, and their goals. Really make a commitment to connection, the right levels and kinds that you need to build sales, and consistency of the personnel who are making the calls, the frequency and content of the calls themselves, and your trajectory of engagement. So, love to know as we move into our Q&A period, what one thing are you going to commit to do, and by when? Or drop into the chat, what's your aha or your big takeaway from what we've learned today? Drop it in the chat. Let's take a look and see what we've got. We're going to get ready for questions. So what are you going to do? Just drop it in the chat or the Q&A and say, what are you going to do and by when? And drop it into the Q&A or the chat. What did you learn? What are you going to try based on what it is that we've learned and we've covered today? Some folks are saying focus, narrow on target agencies. The idea of Best values, talking about best values instead of our set-asides. It's a big deal. Focusing on a specific past performance that's going to resonate with and communicate why you're the low-risk choice. Great ideas. Anybody else? Keep dropping them in the chat, and I would love for you to write me and share with me what happened. And so we have resources for you that can help. Government Contracts Made Easier is my book, and there's also a companion strategy workbook. This Amazon #1 bestseller, you can pick it up today online, right on Amazon. Thousands of people have, and if I can't spend hours sitting at your elbow answering your questions, all the things I would want you to know, it's easy to read, easy to use, and I hope that you'll pick up a copy, work through it with your team. Lots of exercises and more detail on the things we're covering here you'll find in the book. Second resource, a special attendee bonus. You heard me talk about the players at all 5 layers. In order to make that easier, because there's no such thing as government contracts made easy. Easier we can do. I have 22 pages of goodness with details about what exactly your players at all 5 layers care about. What do you talk to them about? It's in this really specific guide, the GovCon Personas Guide. And so here's the link where you can get that guide. And I'm just going to try and drop that right into the chat so that you can get that here. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to try to type well. That's always exciting. All right. And keep dropping your questions in the chat, and Colton's going to come back and get your questions to me. All right. So there's a link to the GovCon Personas Guide. Go get it. If you want to get in front of your federal buyer and close more business faster, folks do work with me in an 8-week experience called the Federal Business Intensive. You can find out more about the program at bit.ly Federal Business Intensive with capitals in the middle, and just find out whether or not we're a fit to work together. Book a 30-minute conversation. I do a limited number of those every month, and you'll come away with at least 3 ideas for things you can do right now. Qualified companies can get on my calendar, so let's find out whether or not we're a fit. And so with that, I'm going to switch control back over and answer your questions. And so Colton, what have we got?
Okay, it looks like the chat, we don't have any questions yet, but I do have some questions prepared. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, what part of the fiscal year is best to contact buyers, and where can we get their information?
I love those questions. The best time of year to contact your federal buyer is right now. There's always something to ask. And the thing to ask can depend on the quarter of the fiscal year. And I'll lay that out for you. In the first quarter of the fiscal year, October through December, October, November, December, I get a lot of complaints from people saying, hey, they're not spending money, or hey, there's a continuing resolution, they don't have budgets, nobody's doing anything. First quarter of the fiscal year is one of the most overlooked opportunity-rich times for someone to make calls, have relaxed conversations, rather than complaining that there's no bids on the street. Yeah, there's no bids on the street. They're going to be really relaxed. You want to be talking with them, especially in first quarter, about what I call the wish list. What are the things that they wish they had done last year? What are the things that experience shows they're going to have to be waiting for somebody to drop a bucket of cash on their head 6 weeks before fiscal year end, and how can they go and actually do anything with that with such a short period of time? What are the projects that always get left to the end of the year, but you can have queued up and ready to roll? Talk about those now. And again, beginning of the fiscal year, that first quarter, they're often willing to talk about what do they wish they had done differently. Really powerful conversations. Second quarter of the fiscal year, January, February, March, that sometimes budgets that have been waiting, and especially in an election year, sometimes budgets are still frozen, but things are starting to thaw. And so January, February, March can be a great time to do some small projects. Talk about those micro purchases, things worth less than $10,000, or simplified acquisitions, contract awards worth less than $250,000 that a buyer can award if they like, based on getting 3 quotes. You don't even have to be on a GSA schedule for that. And so what are the small things that make it easy for someone to let you show your stuff, demonstrate you're a low risk choice, and show that you're somebody that they want to do something bigger with? So January, February, March, great time for that. Also a great time to look at the data and corroborate that with conversations about what are the contract vehicles that you're likely to use this year. Take that intelligence and talk to industry partners. You don't have to get on every single contract vehicle, but you want to be lining up so that the contract vehicles that the data shows your buyers use are ones that you're lined up on. Third quarter, often proposal high season as you move into April, May, June. And so there can be a lot of proposal related activity, a lot of very specific contract related and sales related conversations. And fourth quarter, a lot of things are happening, and it's not just closing stuff for September 30th. Sometimes you're also making a couple of bids, but you know that they've got somebody else in mind, but you're putting in a foundation so that you can have a follow-up conversation in first quarter. And so that's a little bit of the cycle in short form. And federal buyers are everywhere. There are 6 different sources that I talk about where you find your buyers. And so right in front of you, someone who's already done business with you is 12 times more likely to spend more money with you than somebody who's never met you. I want to put it differently. If you're not already talking to people you've worked with, who you've served, who have paid you money, and asking them, hey, how else could we help you? Who else do you know that we should be talking to? Then you're working 1,200% harder than you need to. Who has time for that? Current clients. Second, current contacts. They might never have bought from you, but you've proposed to them, you've looked them up, you've seen their data. They've just not purchased from you yet. Third source, federal employee directories. If you haven't looked to see if your federal agency has an employee directory, you better believe your competition has. Okay. Fourth place, federal databases, contract data, contract records. Every single federal contract transaction generates a ton of data, and that buried in there are leads, names of people whose role and activity and responsibility suggest that they can know more about who needs what you do. And LinkedIn. Over 2 million federal employees have active profiles on LinkedIn. Enough said. If you want to follow up with me about that, we need to have a conversation. And also check out the wisdom published, surprise, on LinkedIn and other places online by Mark Amtower, one of the country's top experts in leveraging LinkedIn for federal business. Finally, when you've looked at all of these places, then blunt force Google search will let you see a whole range of what else is out there, because lots of your federal buyers are active. They publish, they speak at conferences, they receive awards. You can see their digital footprint and learn a lot about them. Colton, did I answer the question?
Yes, you did, Judy. And again, I encourage all attendees to continue asking questions. I do have a couple more ready to go. So, Judy, are incumbents ever looking to trade out bad performing subcontractors? And if so, how do we break in?
I love that question. You'll find, and one of the best ways you can find out how are things going. Is there a subcontractor performing badly? Your federal buyer, if you don't know them very well, they might not be willing right up front, if they don't know you very well, to tell tales out of school. You can say, how are things going? Listen for tone, listen for, I'm tired, I'm stressed. If they say, oh, things are going great, say, hey, we only want to work with the best. What do you like about these folks? And listen to the answer. What else? Tell me what else you like about them. Because eventually they'll get to, oh, but there's this one thing. That could be your opportunity. And to be able to approach a large prime with capability that you may have is much more effective when you've already had conversations in the account with the buyer, and to say, hey, we've heard you might like some extra capacity, some surge capacity in doing this thing. And Vikram over in the Internal Revenue Service office in Oklahoma City said that they could really use our help with this. How can we give you a hand? And so being able to have conversations with both the prime and the agency, and think of something small, some small problem you could solve for them that you've got past performance showing that you've already solved their problem for someone who looks just like them yesterday afternoon can make a big difference.
Thank you, Judy. And I think we do have some more time to answer a couple more questions.
Sure.
So next up is how do we influence the technical part of the solicitation?
Great question. In order to influence the technical part of the solicitation, first of all, you've got a couple of formal opportunities there in pre-solicitation. And so responding to a request for information can be really valuable. A request for information, I've talked to federal buyers about that, and both sources sought and requests for information are a market research phase before something forms into an actual request for proposal. And so request for information is the government kind of sort of wants to do a thing. We don't really know how we're going to do it or how much money we've got or if we're really going to do the thing, but let us pick your brain. So you don't want to necessarily show all the candy, but you do want to talk about ideas or concepts. So you're not going to put your proprietary information there, but leave enough information that you can have follow up with a private one-on-one meeting. Because and so you're not conveying anything that could be later distributed. The earlier you can have a conversation with the buyer, the better. So long before a solicitation hits the street, other ways that you can participate, there may be user groups, there may be industry days, a forum where you can propose an idea in general terms, look and see who is responsive or who wants to follow up with you. LinkedIn itself can be a great place to post an article or share a link from someone who's got a great idea, see who responds. You can also hold a webinar. You're coming to this webinar here. I want you to steal from me. I want you to notice that in this webinar, I talked about 3 concepts. I talked about focus, connection, consistency. I'm going to be talking about those three themes all year and linking my other content. What are your 3 themes? And so hold an informational webinar. Don't get discouraged about did 5,000 people come to your webinar, but provide enough content that someone gets value, wants to get to know you, might want to invite you back, share some ideas, get the conversation going. Colton, I think you need to wrap up and let us know more about other events and other ways that people can work with Jennifer Schaus Associates. So over to you.
Thank you, Judy. Again, here is Judy's contact information available for everyone. And thank you, Judy, for sharing your time with us. And we hope you will join us again for another webinar in our Wednesday series or on FAR supplements and for our Friday series on department and agency playbooks. All of these webinars are complimentary, recorded, and are found on our website, YouTube, and SlideShare site. The recording and slides will be available by close of business tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colton. We'll see you again.
See you later.